Good evening, everybody. This is Monkeys Are Really People Radio. I'm your host for this evening, Michelle Gaza. And if anyone can hear me in the chat room and verify that you can hear me, I would love that. I would appreciate that. Hello, Danny B. Hi, Soul Scientist. Okay, I see there are a lot of people there. It's lovely to see you. So tonight, as you know, I'm hosting Sevan Bomar. And basically for this evening, he's going to just kind of run the show. I'm going to be here as a bit of a moderator. I'll be checking in the chat room if you post questions there, and I can find a smooth way to do so. I'll interject. But we will also keep some time available at the end of the show for phone calls, so hold on to your questions. And thanks for the verification in the chat room. And before I introduce Sevan, I just want to make a bit of an announcement just about the pacing of these shows. Our audience is really diverse. Monkeys Are Really People Radio is really a network of artists and not necessarily astral travelers, although there is a great deal of crossover. So I wanted to do this particular show tonight to introduce Sevan and his work to an audience who may not be familiar with him. So those of you who are familiar with him, it may feel a little bit like review to you, or maybe not, I'm not sure. But there are a lot of people who aren't members of the Resistance website who maybe have never even heard one of Sevan's shows. So I want to just make it accessible to people newer to the material. And then the third show we're going to do, hopefully next week, we haven't scheduled it yet, will be much more advanced. It will be focusing on what people are going to be doing as they ascend, as they come into more and more personal power. What are your dreams? What do you want to manifest? And we'll focus on that. So if you have something that's a little more advanced, if you could maybe hold on to that for the next show. In between and thereafter, I will be also creating some shows helping people with really concrete exercises for things like emotional clearing, how to deal with anxiety or discomfort or issues that come up that can create apparent obstacles in this work. We'll work together to get through those obstacles. You know, 2012 is almost over, so we want to try to get a lot in before the end of the year. So I think that pretty much sums it up. Now I'm going to hand the floor over to Sevan Bomar. Thank you for your patience and welcome.
Oh, it's just amazing to be able to broadcast once more. Thanks for having us on the show. It's, of course, the Resistance is in the house. Wholeness to everyone, and then a lot of members, and of course, there's always guests tuning in. So it's just amazing to be here again to deliver the message. And yeah, as you said, we really want to give people a decent checklist, especially today, on what they can start to work on, but also just making it simple. You know, not getting into so much of the deeper esoteria today, but also talking about something that's just as important, which is really where it all begins. And, you know, as we were talking about earlier, it's really where when you start to get the information at first, a lot of the information just is somewhat puzzling, but you're also intrigued, so that keeps you going. But once things start to connect, the growth is really exponential. So sometimes when you're hearing some stuff that may seem way over your head at this moment, you know, once you start putting all the pieces together, it's not long before it all starts to make sense. And even the craziest idea is sometimes entertained on one parallel or another. And so I just think that at this point, if we can think it, then it's basically in the thought stream. And really invent something new is something that we're yet to see. There's a saying that there's nothing new under the sun, meaning that, you know, everything that's here has been here before at some time or another, and we're not necessarily the inventors. We're just reinventing and bringing out new things. But before that all starts, or what appears new to us, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, I want to say again, thank you for being here. Excuse me, thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here. Of course, you know, there's a lot of connections that are being made. You know how they talk about 3 degrees of separation, and how, you know, you should be able to get in touch with anyone that you need to get in touch with by the one individual next to you, and then that individual reaching the person. And I've actually had a chance to experience that in my life now, that if there's someone that I need to talk to or mainly get some information, then I have that just you know, a few steps over, sometimes the next step over. So I want to definitely put people in the same shape to be able to access who we are. I mean, this is a massive awakening going on the planet, but this is something that's going on all the time, like whether it's insects awakening or whether it's birds awakening or whether it's other ethereal beings that you can't even see awakening, or ethereal things going on that you can't see. There's always an awakening. So that's really what I want to be more the tone for today. But of course, today's show is 1,000 ways to raise your vibration. I didn't want to put in ways in like any type of order because some people may say, well, I think that was more important than the other one. So I did come up with this that I think that people can utilize if they want to raise their frequency. And of course, it's going to be very how can I put it? It's going to get deep into the grooves of how you work every day. Because of course, if you don't experience activation, high levels of energy expansion, then there is just some calibrating that has to be done with your body or your mind or your soul. And but before I get into about that, which I in this without any water.
All right. I was smart this time. I brought my glass.
I bought a smoothie in here, but that's actually got some acai or something in there. But I'm just going to go and need to get some water real quick. I do.
Well, do you want to go do that, and I can just make some business announcements and.
For sure. Okay.
Okay, so we'll have Sevan back in a couple minutes. I just want to thank Michael Wall for being the sponsor of the show this evening. He's got a book coming out soon called Jive Turkey, and it's about how he discovered one of the 7 wonders of the world, and you can find out more about it at jiveturkeythebook.com. Don't go to jiveturkey.com. They're selling turkeys in Chicago, and that is not Michael's page. Otherwise, as always, Monkeys Are Really People is a group that is always interested in new content for our radio shows. So if you'd like to interview someone, whether it's Sevan or someone else, and it doesn't matter the topic, this is, again, an artist network, so it doesn't necessarily have to be about esoteria. We're open and interested. And you don't have to be a professional, and if you've never done it before, I'll produce the show for you. We can make it really easy. But basically, we're a network of artists that are just supporting each other, collaborating on projects, just trying to grow as people. So a really wide range of things that we're interested in. Other than that, we will be having, as I said earlier, a couple shows coming up just to learn some techniques for emotional clearing, emotional processing. A lot of people have had a lot of really wild stuff happen in 2012, and you may feel like you have a backlog, some energies you don't know how to deal with, so we'll be doing a show on that. It will probably be called No Inner Child Left Behind, and if you're interested, you can either, I think there's a little button on the page on the internet if you're listening via the web where you can choose to follow our network and you'll be automatically notified. I'm attempting to do that show soon, but there's a couple of workshops I need to attend next weekend, so I may not be able to do it then. And again, we'll be having a third show with Sevan, hopefully within the next week, where we do some more advanced discussion of these matters. If you don't know about it yet, Sevan has a website, The Resistance 2010. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll get to it. You can join in. It's just a simple sign-up process. You just have to agree to their codes of behavior in the group. And it's an excellent resource if you're interested in this. Probably many of you listening are already members. I myself only just joined. I just found out about Sevan in the last couple months. So new people are just coming into the fold. But it's a really exciting time, so thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Oh, and finally, if you want to contact me, my name is Michelle, and my email is grumpycheerleader@gmail.com. Contact me if you have suggestions, criticisms, critiques, ideas, anything. But we're looking for feedback because we're a very new radio station, and we're still kind of discovering who our audience is and who's interested in what we're doing. So any of your feedback helps. And let me just check. Sevan, are you available?
I'm here.
Okay, great, beautiful. Okay, so let's take it away.
Okay, definitely. Excuse me. I just, when you know that we at least probably have about 30 minutes nonstop talking, you really don't want to do that with no water.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, okay, yeah, we can definitely get right into this. Like, I just wanted to first say to everyone, it's a little bit late at night, but I envision a time where there's no sleep. I envision a time where we're so awake all the time that we have the opportunity to do all the things and complete all the things that we want. Like we spend a large amount of time sleep, or at least in a what I call a state of mind, which is more like a daydream / I'm tired but I'm here type feeling. And of course, that's really what we get into the most is energy for the body. So before I start getting into how the body is really split up in the mind, body, and soul, let me I'm just going to grab a chart here. Okay. All right, so basically, what we're really here for is we're definitely attempting to get a lot of the information that's going on in this reality and what's important to us, and we want to really get that fast. And what's happening, of course, is there's a plethora of information. There's a lot of people saying different things, and certain things are going to happen. You have prophecies going on everywhere, and people predicting things, and you have all this recommendation, whether it's yoga or whether it's some green food and or maybe some bag of juju beads or something or another that's supposed to bring you wealth, prosperity, health, expansion into even other dimensions, maybe a relationship with higher self, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this new arena that we're starting to embark on where we're leaving the dock of our old religions and faiths and belief systems that have been impressed upon us. And so now, we're going into strange water, meaning that a lot of the spiritual techniques and their origins and, their origins and those kind of things don't become something that we really think about when we get involved in certain things. And thus, when we have certain results, whether they be what you call positive or negative, it still really lies within the person doing enough research or if they had done enough research before they got involved, they would have understood that the key pieces to what they're studying have to be put in place first before they can fully expand with it. And when I say you're studying something, this doesn't always mean like some esoteric knowledge. It also could be art. It could also be discovery of self. To me, it's anything that you engage in with most of your time and attention. So right off the bat, there's an old saying that, we are what we eat. And I think that it's time for us to really think about not just what we're eating on a food level, but also a mental and a spiritual level. And that's really where I start to look at a specific system that I use. And I call this system the MBS, the Mind, Body, and Soul System. And this is because I started realizing a long time ago that we weren't just dealing with our own physical self. We also had a spirit body, and we also had a mental body. And, without taking a lot of time to describe what each and every one of those bodies do, it's just easy for you to sit back and see how that may be possible, that you have basically 3 different stances that you can really deal with yourself, and it's how you're comprised. But you'll find that even if you believe that it won't be something new, that this knowledge of the different what's called vehicles that we're contained in that makes up our complexity has been known since ancient times. And so where we begin at with our evolution here, as they call it, or some call it even now hybridization, or some call it emancipation, some call it many different things, but when we're moving and we're constantly breaking records, like every Olympics there's a record broken, so we're constantly getting ahead of a curve. This process brings us into what we have as a stage of, I guess, again, the only word I can really use here is evolution. I normally have a more creative word, but basically I'm trying to get across when you start one way and then you begin to alter over time. So we have to ask ourselves, what primarily altered humanity to expand into the consciousness that it's in now? And of course, the new popular idea is that, there was alien involvement. And of course, I've definitely got deep into where those type of ideas lead and how malicious they are and who really propagated those type of teachings. But what we find out is that where our evolution came from was what our intake was. ever since the beginning, ever since the first tribes that arrived here on Earth and they began to eat the flora and the fauna that was indigenous to them, or the food from the garden, this is what begins to metamorphosize the human being. And there's a reason why for this. Because a lot of the fruits from the trees we've been consuming since the beginning. But what you'll find is something very, what we call now, magical about the trees, which is that anything that we could really desire here on this planet can be accomplished by a tree. And I'll explain. Some people want to look very young again. There's a tree. Some people want to be very strong. There's a tree. And what I mean by there's a tree is not something like magic, but that if you notice Big Pharma and Big Chemical, what they've done is they've been able to sequester the knowledge of the trees that are in the forest and the elements that are in them inside of the gene pool in the trees. And what we're really dealing with here is that because of the essence, like if you want to know where our finickiness comes from, if you want to know where our ability to reason comes from, or our ability to have muscles comes from, you can extract all those genes from trees. So in the ancient times, this of course was already known, and many people have heard about, especially the tree of life or the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the fact is that just from a mathematical level, if you go back to your grandmother, then her grandmother, I always say this, you eventually get back to a small group of people. That's just mathematics. That's not a myth. But in addition to that, people should start thinking, the idea that there was an apex human that was androgynous is not out of mathematic terms based on the system of the pyramid, meaning that as you continue to go back, you get less people, and then you get the beginning. So some people would get lost in just even considering what that would be for us as human beings, what would the beginning be like. But we don't even consider the trees because we're so self-centered. We don't consider the animals and what their possible states could have been when they were not domesticated and not involved in mankind's life, especially as his food, and what their attitudes and behaviors and communications are really like. Because the same way that we were disconnected from our ancient language of intoning and vibrations and frequencies, the animals have been being domesticated and trained and changed, and all the frequencies and harp devices and things are making their metamorphosis on them too. Because what happens is that the change that comes about on this planet comes about collectively. And it is indeed sometimes like a very long, some people in a sense would use a snake, because on one end, there could be one thing going on that is not going on the other end. Meaning that you have this stretch of vibrational frequency that on the high end, it seems like almost everything is perfect. While on the low end, it seems like everything is chaos. And then where you happen to be, where your vibrational frequency happens to land you in an incarnation, is how you experience life. So to take it from there, you can see our arrival here whenever it took place, and our consumption of whatever it was that we chose to consume began to metamorphosize us. I like the metamorphosis better than evolution, by the way. So the metamorphosis was, as it states, that if you go to indigenous people or people who are still carrying their original genes, their genes consist of the flora and fauna, meaning the plants and the trees in which they grew up around. So when you have something like colonization and a blending of races that used to really contain one specific gene pool, now you're into hybridization. Now you're into, again, blending genes in order to create something. So we have to see that now our consumption, because I just explained now another consumption, I explained actually sexual consumption, meaning that there's a gratification and desire to coexist and to breed. And that also is an intake for us, and it's a food. It's something that we need. Now, some people can figure out how to do without it, just like some people can figure out how to do without other things that others would appear to actually need. But in general, if we did not populate, then we would not be here. So that is also a hunger. So what we choose to engage in now sexually, we find out is something that should be considered. Of course, from food, it has to be considered. And then another key point is spiritual. What have we really made our definition of what source is? And the reason why this becomes important is because source defines self, meaning that your idea of who, quote unquote, God is or the Most High is actually will define you. So even though there's been a whole dossier of continuous information about possibly many of the gods and the different deities and religions that have been worshipped over time have a negative connotation to them, it still doesn't mean that the gifts, or basically what was already here before we started doing things to each other, are not attainable and were not already something that we were supposed to have. Meaning, one of the major gifts here in our world is the sun. The sun baffles people from a level of that they need it every day. They know if the sun doesn't come out, then we're definitely going to let go of this vehicle, this physical vehicle. But they don't know what it is on an individual level. And so it becomes like a riddle to us. But now we have people that are beginning to unravel those riddles. And what it's really saying to us is that the sun was the first device, if you want to use that term, that was ever created to be perpetual. It was what we wish to even accomplish right now, we've already accomplished. Look how backwards the world is. They are looking for, as you see in the movie X-Men and you see in the movie Batman Returns and in a few other movies, you see they're looking for or have a device, such as they call it in one movie, the Tesseract, that generates an infinite amount of energy, because everyone is in search of perpetual energy. You might as well get on the search, get on the quest, as we call it, because it means infinite consciousness. See, there's a slight differentiation, without getting too far off here, there's a slight differentiation between immortality, which you are anyway, meaning you're the soul. Souls can be destroyed. They continuously reincarnate into the vehicle that is prepared for them. So what is it for us to now go to the next level? And we're just going to have to leave that thought to everyone for a little bit. Going to the next level for us, what will it really mean? We see this world at a standpoint where the consumption obviously is going to catch up at some point, even if it's 10 years, if it's 15 years. This the way that we live, until we come up with something to drastically change it, has almost like a time stamp on it, a deadline. Unless perpetual energy is somehow located. But while many are working on free energy for houses and cars, there are the most intelligent that are working on free energy for the body. And the reason is that the ultimate realization, just to get to the idea that I left off earlier, conscious immortality is when you have enough energy to power your hyperdimensional vehicle, your power, your soul, as you call it, in the astral plane. You're fully conscious when you're dreaming. You're not just watching something going on. So this is the kind of energy that is associated with the next level of humanity's expansion. Now, it's very interesting because when you really start digging into, especially the secret knowledge, spiritual knowledge, even occult knowledge, you'll find that this is not something new. This is just the treasure of Earth. The level of expansion that we're talking about and the levels of energy here that we're talking about can be activated within the human being or awakened within the human being, also have the potential to become a weapon. This is the thing with everything that has an immense level of power. Just like the sun has an immense level of power, its energies can be converted. In fact, the photon energy from the sun is the number one element being used by the so-called controllers or elite. Because it is the element that everything else in the as they call it sometimes the illusion, is made out of. And what I mean is that the photon is the origin of what you later on see as a computer. So why not get it when it's a photon? You see, what you're dealing with in being convinced to take is more or less the hand-me-downs of the universe. Plastic, psi, the different external expenditures that's going on to keep us from the control point. The control point of the energy, at least from that source, is definitely the photon. So let us get into, again, number one, how to raise your vibration and frequency is to start watching what you choose to take inside of your mind, your body, and your soul, and to feed it well. Feed it good stock. And that's how you can begin to raise the frequency in a really brute force way. So that was number one. Michelle, do you have anything to say over there? If I can keep going. I'm going to number two.
Yeah. Just, I've put my mic on mute because I'm sometimes typing in the chat box and I don't want the sound of my activity to interrupt. I'm just taking notes because, like I said to you before we got on air, Sevan and I spoke for a moment. It's difficult as a host because every 2 sentences gives me an idea of something else to talk about. But I love what you said about the hand-me-downs of the universe. I mean, it's that whole idea in our culture of, things being a pyramid and there's always someone higher than you who's going to have more, and this weird distribution of resources and power and the centralization of power is so treacherous. But, yeah, basically everything you're saying is great, and I'm going to let you keep going on to number 2, and I'll chime in again if something else comes up.
Okay, great. So, just again, to be clear, the sun is some hyper-intelligent, already put together to perpetual motion and set it in the sky, and now it just drives off all this energy of photon light, okay? Just to catch up there. So what we're saying is, and what I'm saying is directly, is that what when I say they, I mean the so-called controllers, Illuminati, whatever you want to give them the term of today, they want us to pursue something with our intelligence especially that's already here. And I think there's pretty much a good deal of people who are already aware of the whole oil situation but really what it boils down to is it just boils down to using petroleum, using plastic. Because, not to get completely into something that may sound a little weird, but the reaction that plastic has and silicone has to us is something that we really have to study, because we are carbon-based life forms, and because of that, when we come in contact with silicone, it becomes enraveled within our organic body. And so I just again want to explain to people that this is something. One of the reasons why you have to really awaken yourself and get into seeing what's going on is because you can start taking back control of yourself and say, okay, well, look, if everyone else around me is doing all this other stuff and they're not listening, they can't listen to this, at least I should work on getting myself together. And maybe if I expand enough, I can be a system. But at least with my expansion, it means my conscious survival. Now, notice how I keep putting this word consciousness on. It's important for me to do it because you're going to survive. You're mortal.
Hey, Sevan, I'm just going to interject 1 second. Your line is a tiny bit staccato, and it's making it just a little difficult to follow. Are you in a weird zone in your home or something?
Yeah, but hold on. Let me just let me see if I can.
Yeah, I don't know if you know where your best spaces are. I can hear your words, but the volume is choppy. Yeah. Somebody said maybe check your battery, or I don't know. Sevan's in Costa Rica. I don't know what the reception is.
Real quick, let me just do a internet briefly here, and I'm just gonna okay now.
Okay.
Sound equipment.
Okay. Do you need a minute? Should I play some music, or are you okay?
Music, because I think there's something streaming, and
okay. Okay, sorry everybody, I'm going to find some music to play and we'll just take a brief break. And actually, we've been going for a minute, so if you want to even take a bathroom break, we'll do 4 or 5 minutes right now. Okay, that was Born Kenise, Keep on Walking. And I believe Sevan is back on. Are you there, Sevan?
I'm just not sure how that sounds.
Perfect. Sounds excellent. So thanks for your patience, everybody. We got a great connection. So I'm not sure where we were.
Oh, I have some notes here.
Okay.
Yeah, it does that. Like I've noticed that lately, Blog Talk Radio's been having some situation with Costa Rica, but hey.
Well, you sound lovely right now. It's very crystal clear.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
All right, well, yeah, I definitely left off that, you are what you eat. So I think I really got that enough to let people see that, we're going to talk about sun gazing a little bit later on because that is on the list. But just to understand, I do roll a lot of this with a story. I don't just say, you need to do this and you need to do this. It just is so dry to me. But I think there's a very interesting story to us being here and to how we're expanding and who's on the planet with us, et cetera. So that's also a major part of our energy system, because people have to see that, humans are actually even capable of boosting themselves and giving themselves energy on ideas alone. Meaning that if you just have an idea that you actually won the lottery, like you bought the ticket and they call you on the phone and say you won, and they repeat the number to you as your number, but they say, but come tomorrow. How much energy are you going to have between that time and tomorrow? Because you have this idea that you won the lottery. So, of course, the person wouldn't be able to sleep. It would just be immense. So that's one thing that we have to see, is that our mind has a level of power to it where if our ideas and our will become strong enough, then we can literally power ourselves through anything. So everyone should really, really think about that. Like the motivation at times is within us, and it just needs to be accessed sometimes from just simple thoughts like that. The next thing that I would definitely say is to raise your vibration or frequency, you really need to work with a fertile field. And I know one thing, Michelle, I just to let you know, I think when you did mute your line, it may have it may have prevented that line thing from happening. I'm not sure, though. I was just letting you know.
I'm keeping it open now, and I'll just try to be as quiet as possible here if I'm in the chat room.
Okay. So, yeah, what I was saying is the difference in between a fertile field versus an infertile field. And this is something that we never really think about, but, of course, all of our ideas and even things that we say out of our mouth is basically a seed. And depending on our will, basically how much we think it's going to happen and how diligent we'll make it happen, it determines whether that seed ever comes to life. So because of that, there is a heavy level of especially ancient knowledge where especially the indigenous would consecrate their fields with fertile energy, meaning that they knew that abundance was surrounded by especially orgasmic energy, meaning the feeling of joy and happiness, and that things often grew very abundantly in that kind of energy versus in the energy of death or right angles, metal structures, concrete structures. There is oftentimes not oftentimes, but all the time, a very infertile field going on. And I guess I won't get too much into the difference between the different classifications, but we'll save that for another show. But just understand that if you really want something to occur, and you're really looking to expand, you need to put that idea, because if you're having problems actually accomplishing that, and you're asking yourself, well, why am I having problems and making this happen, and it's not happening fast enough? This is because you have to put more energy behind it. And I guess that'll get us into another part of something else that I have to talk about. I'll just put a note here because I didn't actually have it on the list. But it does relate to sexual energies, which is, these are topics that if you go to some type of spiritual theism or dogma, they may just opt out of these conversations altogether unless they're generally Eastern teachings. And then even then, you may not get the correct interpretation of exactly what they're talking about, but it really boils down to something simple. Inside of your body, there is an immense level of energy, and this energy is actually the massive level of information of who you actually are and your biorhythm and what it connects to, in the base of your spine. And it's coiled there very similar to a disc, like a disc or a DVD is circular rings where it just contains a massive amount of information. So it's the same thing. You have this coiled disc of a massive amount of information, and the only way for you ever to come into full realization of who you are, then you have to uncoil it and allow it to actually expand your vehicle. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. Hopefully that makes enough sense. But you would be uncoiling your biorhythm, or what is basically hidden about you. I mean, people always ask, where's my past life, and I wonder what I was before, and can you tell me what what kind of person I am, or what I should look for with my astrology? So many people ask those kind of questions, but of course that is the key to those kind of questions. So the next thing I have on the list is, number 2 is fertile fields versus infertile fields. If you want to really manifest something, get into where it's really abundant. You can generally tell that by the level of green colors, nature, birds singing, life springing up everywhere, versus downtown New York. You see, it's, totally different frequency. But if you're trying to really manifest something, especially if it's organic, then you're going to need to go into an organic environment. Now, it just so happens that in infertile fields, I will just leave this disclaimer that numbers work well in infertile fields because numbers are really straight line. And I guess we'll talk about that later. So what we have here is we have the next thing on the list I have is your current constellation. And many people don't realize that where they actually live and what city they've been in, and even the city they're born in, is actually a constellation, because the entire Earth, we call this geoenergetics, lines exactly up to the stars. And when it's in its 12 o'clock position, basically, then all of the stars lay out to where the cities and the countries and the states and the continents and the regions that correspond to those stars are. So, of course, when the Earth is spinning, then it's not on. But once it hits, unquote, 12 o'clock for the universe, then all the constellations are laid out. So that's why it was so important for the ancients to figure out when exactly this began, so they can understand the original configuration of the planet before it started spinning. So what this actually leads to is this leads to information that uncovers exactly how you're being what I call occultated. This is your entire life is going through constellations and learning through experiences and interactions with other individuals that resonate on the frequencies of that constellation. So to make it very simple, every day you're carrying out an astrological procession of yourself, and the individuals that you're meeting are part of the constellation that you're trafficking through. So what generally happens is if you find yourself not able to move or move something or get expanded in your life, or i.e. raise the vibrational frequency, you can attempt to make a constellation move. This means go somewhere else where it's not where you've been staying for the last period of time that you've been stuck, and stay there, and then that shakes up and raises frequency. So just understand you're in a constellational thing, and it's important for you to realize that you may be stuck sometime in Scorpio, or God forbid, for Draconis. No, I'm just saying, like, or stuck in areas that really do correspond to some of the netherworld regions of the galaxy. We'll keep going with this. The number 4 I have here is the Crystal Kingdom. Let us not forget, we do have allies on this planet. Like, some people say, well, sometimes I have this conversation, people are like, well, where's the benevolent forces? There are benevolent forces, believe me, of course, that's what's keeping a lot of things together here, but it's really our oversouls. We shouldn't really look to that there's something external that is going on. It's really all inside, especially when we're dealing with immense levels of energies and powers. So the Crystal Kingdom in itself is really the first part of awakening yourself because of what we call magnetic buffering. And I'll explain this very briefly. Many people know that even awakening Kundalini is very dangerous. Many people have a lot of disclaimers around awakening Kundalini, and that is for just reasons. But what happens is that why everyone's demonizing Kundalini. No one ever steps up and says, well, how do we repair the problem? It's like, so that's basically like everyone sitting there looking at the crash-landed ship, complaining that the ship is crash-landed, and nobody's trying to figure out how we're going to take it back off again. So, of course, I went to the next level of figuring out how we're going to take it back off, and it really, really corresponds to us first doing what I call magnetic buffering to our chakras before we attempt to awake them. And how this works is if you notice that each crystal corresponds to, has a color, basically. And there's so many crystals that each hue of our aura and all the different colors, the hues of different people's auras can appear in, there is that actual crystal here. When you work with the crystals and you just utilize them to buffer your chakras, they bring you to the point of, they bring many of the things that need to be cleared through that chakra to the surface. And it brings it into also the physical reality so that you can deal with it sometimes in another way or sometimes with the same individual that it originally occurred. But it will basically bring up that old rooted or anchored agony and allow you another opportunity to get that out of your wheel, so basically, and discard it so that you can start becoming really balanced. So look deep into, again, the crystal kingdom, even on eBay, like now, because semi-precious stones, which of course is anything besides like a diamond or a ruby or emerald, etc., semi-precious stones have pretty much taken over the market. So this leaves a very hefty but very inexpensive market of what they call semi-precious stones, but are crystals that contain very, very helpful essences for people's chakra centers, especially with getting rid of strange problems. We'll just leave it at that. So yeah, this is a big thing because also people have to realize there's already information that's passed forth that many individuals that can actually see auras are noticing that individuals are having now a clear aura. It's basically about 4 or 5 inches thick of what looks like clear light around them. And this is, some people think, yeah, that's taking the light, brothers and sisters, namaste. But in reality, that's not what you're supposed to have. You're actually supposed to have a full spectrum aura of 7 colors, and that's what they should see. So what we found is getting into is that when your chakras are not instructed or they don't see the correspondence of a proper correspondence of the color that they really are, then they begin to lose their color. This, of course, leads to sickness. It leads to loss of identity. It leads to sleep, etc. So realize, of course, this is how it all ties in with awakening, with the crystals and things, because your body, at times, when it's forgotten what its perfect self is like, it will search for actual perfect. It will search for a perfect replica. It will search for something else, and this is also why this expansion for this planet can happen so fast, because when individuals start to come forth with the right information and the right knowledge and the right level of expansion, it spreads to individuals very rapidly. So, people just think
about. Can I ask you a question? Can you just expand on what you mean about they'll search for a perfect replica? I don't understand what you mean.
Yes, what happens is with DNA, over time, it corrects itself.
Okay.
So because all of this stuff is on a biorhythm and sensitive to each other, you can walk by a person that actually has a part of their DNA that is fixed, that is in a part of your DNA that's not fixed. And the DNA, because it's always chomping information, and this happens on an auric level. People, your memory is not in your brain, it's in your aura. That's why when you dream, you're out of the body, but you still have your name, you have a lot of information. So we have to see that what's happening is that you're coming into contact. There's actually, some people will call it like sexual, but it's a communion all the time with various essences that you can't even see. But one of the major levels that you should be functioning on that makes sense to most people without getting into the etheric forces is the DNA. And because the DNA is always looking through other people's information basically to fix itself, if someone comes by you or touches you or kisses you or whatever, and they have perfected DNA, or at least a string where your string is not perfected, it will begin to repair itself. So that's why I mean the DNA is looking for, at all times, the perfected version of itself. Does that make sense?
And for some reason then this is making me think about this idea, and I've experienced it. If you are seeking to ascend, if you keep company of people who have ascended or have already started down the path, it kind of rubs off on you. This sounds like a more concrete manifestation of that, if I'm understanding correctly.
Well, for sure. I mean, and that's 100% truth, because we're really like vessels. So anytime we begin to expand with higher levels of knowledge and awakening, it starts to fill us up. And so even if the person gets empty at a certain point, they still contain the essence of when that filling was going on. And you got to realize, we're just trying to keep this conversation today within the proper boundaries of someone who's just hearing this. But you can also start to lead to other conclusions with the information that was given today, especially in regards to, as we get through the conversation, as you can see, there's various energy levels here. If you can think about we have this intake thing going on between our mind, our body, and our soul, you can start asking yourself, well, what about the people who really do pay attention to this? I may not want to pay attention, but is there happen to be groups of people that really get into what they intake and actually specify and program basically every single day what they take in to equal a certain level of consciousness? And by all means, yes, there's many people that found their body more fascinating than iPhone 5. Mm-hmm. So it's about us also seeing that we've been in this cave with thinking that, our country, and especially in the Western culture, our country is what's setting the trends and things, but totally ignoring what's been going on in ancient cultures and the world, abroad. And so that's, of course, what the Internet has been helping with, is getting that information to everyone, and we're starting to get that information, but now it's time for us to feel that information, because it's the whole trick with the electronics that one has to worry about, is becoming like a number, becoming like plastic, becoming insensitive, and thinking that is okay. That's also the next level to it. Many people.
That quickly. That's also why I just want to, and I'm sorry if it's redundant and I'm beating a dead horse, but that's why I kind of want to have these other shows reaching out to people who maybe, we're doing a lot of meta level discussion here, and because of the nature of radio, and also just because of the topic today, this is sort of a didactic experience. This stuff can bring up a lot of emotions, a lot of stuff that's kind of difficult to process through a computer with strangers. You don't know me, you don't know Sevan. So I'm looking to try to create more ways, and people are doing it successfully, to create safe communities using the Internet where we can get into more of that stuff. But I'm always concerned that there's a disconnect for people who listen to a show like this and feel like they can't relate because we're not getting into the earthy nature of the emotions of it. And I just want people to know that I don't want them to feel invalidated because they're not riding this wave with us, this very Vata air kind of conversation, that all that stuff is legit. And I think that's the other challenge, is that, we've discussed before, that drive towards abstraction, which makes us less invested in the earth, less invested in our bodies, less invested in the emotions, more into numbers, more into the head, more into being robotic. And while the Internet is so helpful, it does have the danger of kind of exacerbating that. So, there are so many ways, though, now that you can create community via the Internet and meet in person and make small groups. But the community aspect is just so important. I know for me, I worked in isolation for a really long time. I wasn't even comfortable talking to a lot of people about the shamanic work I was doing, because a lot of people think it's pretty weird. Now a lot of that's changing, and I just really want to encourage people, join the Monkeys Are Really People group on Facebook, join Sevan's organization, the Resistance 2010. You won't feel so alone if that's happening for people out there. But I don't want to digress. Keep on going.
For sure. I mean, it's definitely some good information, good points. I also, people can listen to reason. That's really what we're talking about here. I don't think this is so complex in that we're using so many diverse words that a person can't just hang on to the general concept. I mean, they go through a lot more watching one of these movies coming from Hollywood, and then in the end they'd be like, huh? But then they'd be like, oh, I get it. That one guy, he's really the bad guy, but that guy, so they figure it out. So this is no different than that. You just use reason and that's how I came to where I'm at. Like, I definitely am not the individual that takes any type of information as being truth if I haven't fully authenticated it. I just don't have time for that. Like, there's people that play around in this world, and then there's people who are really, really trying to figure out why are they here, what are they here to do, you know, who is everyone else around them, what is their relationship to them. Like, all those questions are really being answered now. So we're going at that with a lot of strength, because it's not so much as some people say, well, are we running out of time? We're already out of time. Like, the reality is that why are we even in time?
Right.
Like, we're on a planet where the knowledge of how to step outside of time was already available thousands of years ago. And so it's still, again, going to be about the person. They should ask themselves, again, is that something that they really want? Because that's not the only part to it. And that's why right now the concepts are very high for what we can get out of spirituality. But the original teachings, a person's mind was never calibrated as they were expanding to start desiring things. And I'll just make that very clear. It's like you were on this fantastic adventure, and it was like, wow, wow, wow. So you never really ordered up what you wanted next, because how would that ever be wow? It's like, okay, I want, you know, I want this kind of reality. I want the beach to be this, and I want my house to be on the beach. And you see, so now, once that is accomplished, by the time you accomplish it, you're going to be there for a couple months. You're going to finally be like, okay, I finally got my house. And then you're going to start working on something else. It's not going to be amazing, and there's the wow is going to last a very short period of time, is what I'm trying to show people. So the way that we're doing things now are exactly backwards. And for many that speak English, just to use this one etymology, which I always love to put in there because etymology is a big thing, but it's backwards. Our language is backwards. Especially to all languages that go from right to left. Our language goes from left to right. And that means something, because that controls the direction of our brain. And so what we're really, really dealing with here is that for people to, you can make it simple. You can walk someone out of this if they're just willing to listen, but they also have to see that there is a situation going on. This is the other part of what I think personally is the difference between the groups that are like, hey, everything is fine, and then you never progress, versus the groups that are just giving you too much information and everything is doomsday. There seems to be no neutral point in there. And I'm telling you, we found the neutral point, which is being able to take all this information and allow it to empower you. It becomes fuel to you understand, okay, after a while, and I've just explained to people what happens. If you start to take certain stuff serious, then you can also start coming to other conclusions. Meaning like, okay, if there's water here, then there's life. But even deeper, if there's light here, then there's life. So that means anywhere that light is reaching, there's some kind of life there. So is there other life out there? Yes. Every single planet and star that is being reached by this light, there is life there of some sort. So this is like, and then you can go to the next, you can start going to the next conclusion. It just takes a person to actually start believing in something. And that something is themselves. Actually not a bit information, because people will always keep looking more and more for one thing or another. But the true thing is to find self. Because that's the gimmick of this work, is to make a person look externally for something that's really inside. That's, of course, the gimmick to all religions. That's the gimmick to anything, or even incentive to anything that says that what we really need is on the outside of us. What's going on the outside of us is basically was our playland, which is now becoming more of a nightmare. It was our birthing field. It was a place for us to generate abundance. Because notice how Earth, despite all this stuff that's going on, is still very abundant. Trees are still birthing and making more plants and seeds, and we're now more beings and more grapes, more everything. It's just now about how selfish we're going to get about planting some of this stuff and giving it to people. It has nothing to do with whether Earth is fertile enough. And they say, oh, it's a population problem, we're running out of space. And there's thousands of acres. If you ever drove across Texas, it's like nothing out there. But these are easily could be super populated and super irrigated with the proper stuff that we've already discovered. So, but people, okay, so I want people to realize this. If that's the case, then what's stopping us from doing it? How can we get through that? This is, of course, where most people are stuck because they can highlight all of what I just said about, the different ways that we can replenish the environment. But what's stopping us from being able to do that?
Yeah.
And this is where I think that the people that always say peace, this is where they actually stop because they don't realize it's wholeness. Anytime you're going to get a piece of something, you're not going to get it all. Wholeness, which is what we should be saying, peace is two fingers, that's duality. But whole is the whole thing. But the whole thing happens to be the uncomfortable truth. Mm-hmm. But we are actually choose to ignore. Like when someone starts to explain it to us, oh, here he goes, he's going on that again. And that's not wholeness because if it's actually the truth, you're going to need to get the whole truth. So it's not like the problem is the whole truth and not the truth. So that's what we're
right, and I'm glad you're saying that because I feel like the yoga, meditation, New Age movements, there's this sort of some concept with emphasis on con that, to be enlightened, you're at peace and like your farts smell like roses and you never get angry. And it's so insidious and it's so treacherous because enlightenment has no problem with your anger. Enlightenment has no problem with those things. It's your mind or your concept that has a problem with it. And I love that you're constantly coming back to the whole idea of wholeness because at the end of the day, if you're going to be in your power contains it all. So if you're uncomfortable with some aspect of all that is, you can't really be in your power because you're going to be judging it or working against it. So the whole idea of peace sometimes gets turned into this toxic game, and I've gotten pulled into it as well on both sides of it, where people feel this need like you have to be nice or something, or like enlightenment is like always a soft touch. And indeed, when you're in your power, mostly you can do things with very little exertion. But then why be in judgment of something that's on a different range of the spectrum? It's the wholeness. It's everything. It's nasty. It's beautiful. It's pretty. It's ugly. It's sweet. It's sour. It's everything. And this weird, like, puritanical, colonized judgment of anything that even suggests a sort of violence. But then, I see it more like as the Bhagavad Gita sort of perspective, like, what is the violence about? What is motivating it? And why are you sort of having a sentimental need to treat the forms like these precious things you can't scratch when that keeps you locked into the lies? And sort of there's this uncomfortableness, and tell me if you understand what I'm pointing at, with the sort of the quote-unquote negative aspects, but there's nothing wrong with them. And indeed, I think if you look at what's happening on the planet right now, I'd be a little concerned if someone never felt angry because there are things that they could make you angry for good reason. Right.
Well, and then it becomes something that, we choose to ignore, but it's still like, who can ignore the elephant in the room? It's like,
and then
there's a gorilla over there beating on his chest, eventually he's going to come over here, what should we do? And I think that's, of course, just to further what I was just saying about this master solution is only the potential, which is now hidden but can be discovered within, can weld the force that is necessary to put in check the ones that are perpetrating the situation. With them is the counterfeiters. The evolved. And the reason why I give them that name is because there are many, when you get into religions, and everyone has chosen a religion possibly at some point in time, but you get into where there's now an external being that says, I've created something. And even now, under the New Age wrapping, it's, the Anunnaki created us. And this is the same story. Again, it's just we have to see, regardless of who the name is behind it, the story in itself. And I have looked through a lot of the knowledge and looked through a lot of the information, and you find continuously that humanity and what humanity truly is, especially with the spiritual connections and ties, is truly the unbegotten, meaning that it's never been born, so it has no death. It's way beyond the thinking of most of the entities that are in the third dimension, especially. But the truth is that we're actually becoming a part of someone else's dream and idea and not our own. Meaning, when our energy is harnessed and used to build matrices and worlds that we only work in without ever any knowledge of that there's an ability for us to create, that we're actually multidimensional beings, that there is something going on when you're in your dream. There is a way to control your dreams. And to have that field and to have that expanse for yourself, you can imagine how much it would enhance your life. And this is stuff it's not tied to Ouija boards and sacrifices with goat gods. It's not tied to any of that. It's tied to who you are. And this is what we have to discover. It's almost like, to me, it's a university. So they call it a universe. To me, it's a university. So they're going to keep giving you these classes, but the ultimate class is the discovery of self, obviously. Especially if, as we proved, that the human body is a map to the immediate solar system. So once you discover who you are, okay, class graduated. Now you're ready to truly expand into, now you can fathom somewhat what comes next. And here's another thing. I wanted to say this, and it's just a side note, but it's such a clever thought, and I know a lot of people on the line can really, they're going to vibe with it because a lot of course, the consistent listeners. With belief systems, especially, they generally correspond to planetary systems. So let's say, for instance, Saturn. Some people want to go now into Saturnalian traditions and actually practice with Saturnalian magic. But let me ask you this. If you get to understand Earth, how would you ever understand Saturn, seeing how big it is? This is the most interesting thing to me. We are looking everywhere. Venus, who names it? But we're looking in all these different places, the moon way over there, to find something, but we didn't even discover what was here. So this is very similar to me to a child who has like a possession that it's really supposed to be paying attention to and doing everything with, but it's ignoring it. And so this is what I can truly see, because when looking deep into the planet, looking into the nature, looking into the magnetic fields and the celestial bodies and all these things, you find a life and an expansion that is so much greater than anything they can serve up on Fox 5 or anything they can serve up on CNN or Kanan or any of these other channels, that all it is their idea, their dream, their channel. And again, their dream also has become just to keep us asleep. Like, people need to also wake up to, if you have this immense amount of technology and you have these almost nanotechnology and Borg, which is half organic, half inorganic, why do you really need the humanity? It's because humanity is organic. Humanity births photon life. When the baby comes out, that's another photon sun already generating and powering up. So the reality is, the goal is just to keep us asleep. Because there's no such thing as death. When you quote unquote die, all you do is smear into another of what you thought was a dream, and then you wake up. And I always make a joke. I say, you probably ask the person to you, said, man, I just dreamed I died. It was crazy. Because many people have had that dream before. So we also have to understand that in our firmware, basically, in our actual DNA is written the code for survival. It is the most resilient thing. Even if it turns into a bacteria-type state, it's still trying to strive. So this is also where we can see that, again, the cup is half full, because we're now on the dimension with individuals that know what's going on. We have the ability to fabricate, meaning to make things and to create things that we need to expand ourselves. We have an immense amount of knowledge. The only thing that we would have to question of whether we have or not is the time. And that's a big thing, because when you come into expansions of consciousness, you figure out you can control time. You figure out that you're not going anywhere until your mission is done. Well, what happens is that when we're in constant fear, and we just won't get into too much of this, but still understand that the clinging to this reality, the clinging to this environment, like when you do finally buy something, you get a car, you get some clothes, you get, even a girlfriend, you get a wife. What happens is that if you still don't see yourself as a soul that has to expand and can only expand other souls when you're expanding, you can at times dedicate all your time and all the energy of your expansion into an external reality. And if you fail to learn any real truth or anchor to something that is truly bona fide, then when the times pass, as you see, there's people in the encyclopedia now that they've done great things, but you don't even know them. William Howell, he created and did this, he ran the symphony orchestra, he did this play, that play, but no one knows who he is. What is stopping you from being the same way? If not less, because you didn't even do a symphony orchestra. So what we have to do is we have to leave a legend here. We have to leave something that burns bright, so that way we recognize it when we're also going into our astral sense, meaning that when our life has meaning, some people say, well, is this world really real? Is this world real? And I said, my friend, this world is as real as you are. This is 100% law. The world is as real as you are. If you're a fake person and you eat artificial food, things start becoming really hazy after a while.
Yeah, and that kind of links into what what we were mentioning earlier about the abstraction. It's just another. It's floating around, and it's an old philosophical idea too. Like, I think, therefore I am. How do I know I exist? But it's really pervasive, and it just contributes to that numbing. Let's just fall asleep into someone else's dream. And I actually saw, maybe some people have seen this on YouTube. There was somebody doing a documentary or something maybe in Israel, and he confronted some traditional Jewish man in Israel on the street about what was happening in Palestine. And the guy's response was, oh, it's all an illusion anyway. It's all an illusion. But tell that to someone who just got their arm cut off, or their family bombed, or shrapnel exploding in their face. That's not an illusion. And it's a really dangerous trend. And again, back to this computer thing, this is such a great tool, but it always carries that little bit of danger. Anything powerful has danger, and that danger of us just moving into a mind space where we stop connecting in the physical world, which is where we really want to manifest, because that's when it gets so powerful. And also just enjoyable. I mean, sensuality matters.
Yeah, and then people also have to see, just where the simulation takes place and with certain things, and has it already taken place. If you're carrying your entire hard drive inside of your mind right now, like you know exactly what folder to go and get your files, and then some people even know these programs like so heavy they can go in and do some editing and do this and control this, control that. And so they have to realize that that is all resting somewhere on the aura, that information, and it's becoming mixed in with the information that used to exist there on the ancient level. And what needs to be obtained, I will tell you, is balance. It's not getting rid of one and getting rid of the other and fighting one and finding which one is good. You're just on the tree of good and evil. Like, that's the tree that you will surely die, meaning that you will split into two. You will go into duality. You'll have a male and a female on the planet that you live on. You'll be with a two-strand DNA. Even your God will be named Dios, which is, of course, the Spanish name for God, or Zeus or Deus, which is the English name for God. And, you'll be living in basically a weird reality that no matter how I spin it, meaning that it's interesting about truth. It can roll into every single aspect of life. So a person can really give you multiple perspectives of the same thing. And so, I guess the meaning of the conversation, we might as well, we're on a little time frame here. I still got about 6 more things to go through, or 7 more things to go through here about raising the vibration. You ready to keep going?
Well, okay. Tell me your opinion, because again, it looks like we might have to expand the show into a second part, because it seems like that, people are staying in the chat room. People seem to be listening. So why don't you just keep on doing what you're doing? And since we're kind of nearing the last quarter of the show, how about if we invite people who have burning questions or comments to call in? And then if people start to call in, I'll interrupt you in a few minutes. But it might be that people in the audience are willing to still just keep listening. I mean, I'm really interested. So you just keep on, and I'll see if any questions pop up.
Okay, awesome. So the next thing I got on the list is flax singing bowls. And the reason is when you're dealing with frequency generators, let's just get into it, because some people know that you can deal with frequency at times to raise your vibrations. But when you really start studying frequency very deeply, you realize that the carrier, or basically how the frequency is getting to you, makes a world of difference. And generally, if you're using an inorganic device, meaning like you're playing back something that is like a frequency but through a computer or through a digital device, what happens is it actually becomes converted into basically a digital signal. So generally, when you're attempting to apply sound to your body, you need it coming through some kind of organic device, and this is or organic object. So what happens with, of course, singing bowls is that you have the entire glass bowl, and then that frequency is really heavy. So, of course, if you can get a hold to a singing bowl, then that's definitely a priority. But what I've also discovered is that if you use the FLAC files, and I found that there's an actual really nice torrent on singing bowls on Pirate Bay, and you can, and it's all FLAC files. And, of course, FLACs are lossless files. They're basically the file that comes out right when the recording takes place. And so you could use those singing bowls to really work on the chakra centers. That would be the greatest way to apply frequency to how to raise your vibration, because, of course, many people have dealt with different types of frequency generators, special programs, hallucinogenic machines, etc. But we've really run the entire gambit on frequency, especially with items like the GB4000 and, you know, the frequency function generators from Germany, you know, all the different devices. And we've pretty much come to the conclusion that you could do the best with yourself if you go with FLAC, you go with singing bowls. Next up on the list is orgone. Really, orgone is one of those things that it takes a lot of intention to put a proper orgone together, especially now because there's a lot of just orgone frenzy. So the best thing to do is to create it yourself. Also in using organic resin, and you'll know how organic it is if the resin really, really stinks when you're making it up. So there's videos for how to make orgone all over YouTube, but it is very effective. It's something that has vividly been able to remove negative energy from me, especially when I first started this expansion. Of course, you know, when you begin, there's a lot of different things that you're carrying around. You don't even know it most of the time. So sometimes you're in a dark field, and you may need something to kind of vacuum out that dark field. And so that's kind of how orgone works. And it's also just a rule of thumb that if you can verify that the orgone has actually removed some energy, it's then better to discard the orgone after that. Many people don't talk about that, but you don't want to keep the orgone around or keep wearing the orgone. And really only a half dollar size piece of orgone is good enough. You don't have to go with a huge big ball because it looks nice in your house, because either way, when the orgone attracts, it then needs to be buried or something of that nature. So we're going to keep moving through this. Of course, breathing and meditation, but many people think that the breathing and meditation, you know, is back on the namaste tip, but realistically, you have to realize that all the things that the Most High gave you were free, that were the highest level of importance, and one of those is definitely breath. Everything is, as far as if you wanted to find the Most High, is ranked within how fast you can go before you, without it, before you're just out of here. And of course, one of those is breath. It actually comes before water and even food. So if you really want to identify your connection with all there is, then it's in the breath. And so understanding how pranic breathing works is your key. This is different than you just sitting there trying to be calm and calm your mind. This is about being able to reverse your breathing, which is adding oxygen into your stomach, understanding how to blow your diaphragm, which is the lower area in your back, and opening up those three pockets, because that's what actually gets you into the altered feeling, which is basically the feeling that you can really see that there's an energy center in your body. And so I would highly encourage people to look into the breathing and the whole body breathing. We have one video on the site, but I'm gonna get another one done now that we have now that we have the proper equipment. I just want to let everyone know we did finally get everything installed, thanks to Resistance member Jens. We worked on it for about 4 or 5 hours today. I know it's kind of a sidebar, but we finally got all of our live equipment up to begin to show the show in a whole different way. So I guess, you know, I just want to let everyone know that just in case I forget. But again, the breathing and meditation videos, some new ones will be coming out. But still remember, now you got the information. Whole body breathing is totally different than what is generally seen as meditation. And then once you start feeling that energy, you really become fascinated with this energy coming from you, and you become more concerned about building it. Number 8 on the list, of course, is yoga and mudra. And I will tell people to really, to see the difference between ritualistic yoga and what I just call the Yoga 101. That's really where people need to start. And what I mean, the difference is that Yoga 101 is basically you do the moves and you do the poses, and there's nobody yelling out, Wahguru and all the rest of the deities from the Hindu pantheon. Because in that instance, and this is the disclaimer about the yoga, that is actually a ritual. And so in many cases, because the yoga works with chakras, at times you can open yourself up to energies why that chakra is open, and if you're intoning the vibration of a particular energy or ancient deity, etc., then you basically open yourself up to possession. Now, I'll tell you what this possession actually looks like once it gets into many of those yoga fanatics, and it's a complete bliss, meaning that it looks like they're high all the time. They're very soft-spoken. They don't really say much, and they even kind of talk over people when they're in their session. But it just seems like they're not there, and that is again a complete washover of the aura, a complete takeover of the individual. They're no longer themselves anymore and expanding anymore, and they're just completely anchored to this teaching of this, and they'll generally come with the ritual, etc. So be careful of the difference between those. That's a big time disclaimer, because many people think that it's all nice in there. But remember, those Eastern teachings did come from both spectrums of the Sri Yantra, or the yin and yang sign. Also with mudra, that gets a little bit more deeper. Generally, mudras come to an individual as they are in meditation, so I won't really give any guidelines for that. Actually, on the site, there is a general list of mudras, that correspond to the chakras. And those mudras are important because your hand is a microcosmic imprint of you. That's why it's 5 fingers, 5 senses, a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, etc. So within your hand is in many cases the different parts of your organs and things that may need to be cleared with energy, and mudras assist with that, or there needs to be a connection between the left and the right poles. Then that's what mudras really are. Continuing to move along, number 9.
One second, Sevan. Can we maybe just contract right now, if you have, or maybe you could just tell us if it's simple. Some people are asking for recommendations about sources about breathing exercises, and then also, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, the whole body breathing video is on the Resistance site. All they have to do is type in Resistance 2010, then whole body breathing in Google, and it'll come up. But it just basically, it gives you the general idea of how to make sure you're not breathing in your chest. And then it'll also show you how to straighten up your feet so that your coccyx, which is in the little bone in the base of your spine, opens up. There's a small channel through there that actually pulls in pranic air, for better lack of words. And so these are certain specific keys, like the tongue on the roof of the mouth, which most people know now in meditation. But those are the certain things that actually allows you to be in the proper positioning to start to especially feel it vividly, the energy beginning to build up in your body. So, of course, to start to finish this off, we have number 9 on the list is, of course, cleansing your organs. And this is the biggest thing to me. Realistically, it even governs how you think. Like you'll notice that if you've never really gone through a cleanse, and you happen to go through a cleanse, after that, all of kind of what you thought was going on is cleaned. So it's kind of like all of your emotional aspects of interpretation are missing from it, and then you see it as it really is. So cleansing your organs is the brute force way to start to really deal with your frequency and how well you can really perceive things. And so I'll tell you, of course, on the website, we do have many things that help you in each of these individual areas, but we have the best products for this. But because there's a price tag attached to it, I do tell people that how you can go to the internet and you can find the remedies for how to flush your kidneys and flush your colon. The only thing that you need to make sure you're going to do, that you do if you do take that route and don't use the guide, is to make sure that you're flushing your organs in the proper order. And even if you want to find out what that proper order is and you don't have the currency to buy the kit, you can download the book that goes with the kit, which is free, and you can see the order of how the cleanse is done. So that's very important because you don't want to flush the impurities of one organ into another organ because you can agitate that organ and cause an even greater problem, and then you feel like, oh, I did this cleanse and now I'm really sick, my whole body shut down, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a way to do this. So,
Sevan, I'm just actually looking on the site. So how do people find that book to download the order in which they cleanse the organs?
Okay, yeah, you can go to the energy store, which is basically the second tab from the home. You can go there.
Yeah, right now.
And then right there it says internal cleansing kits. You can actually click on internal cleansing kits, and then there'll be a write-up there about the internal cleansing kits. And towards the bottom of that write-up, there'll be a link that says click here for a copy of the dosage, I believe it says. So yeah, everyone can actually access that there, and I'll double check on that to make sure it's there, but I'm almost 100% positive that it is there.
Okay, I've just put a link in the chat room. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, also, so cleansing your organs is a big thing. It actually, your organs are playing a harmony. That's why it's called an organ. Everything to do with vibration is about your liver, kidney, gallbladder, heart, etc., and how well they're functioning. So when you actually do a cleanse of those and you do that cleanse properly, it really, really, you're in like a new body. It was even at one point where I couldn't feel anything in my chest and lower stomach area. It was so cleansed that I didn't feel the gravity of my organs. If people can kind of visualize that, but that's what you'll be looking forward to. Number 10 on the list, actually, we went through, I have 12 here, but I want to get through them. Number 10 is actually nature. It's the sure, guaranteed way to get into a fertile field and to start correcting the frequency. A lot of people don't like to stand out in nature for a long time. It starts to irritate them, especially if they're really from the city and they have a hard time, like, just not thinking that, hey, I could be doing something else, or I could be expanding on another level with, reading this book or whatever. You still have to realize that that is part of the situation. Like, you have to see what the connection here is with the planet, and you have to experience that. So you have to understand how to charge is basically the thing. You have to see that there's a cycling of energy also. When I say charge, if I say charge off a tree, some people will go next to a tree and imagine they're pulling energy from the tree. This is not going to even work. What you have to do is you have to visualize cycling energy, because everything in the nature works on a wheel or a cycle. So you have to actually see that there's something that the tree needs from you, and there's something you need from the tree. The tree has an immense level of it, and you have an immense level of it too. This is also similar to why you have carbon dioxide coming out of our mouth, and then they have oxygen coming out of theirs. So there's a symbiotic relationship going on. But to understand symbiotics is to understand that the actual cycling and the perpetual energy, and not being a vampire, which is basically where you're just only looking to drain or get something and not give something. So this, of course, is the big danger in the world. To finish off here, I do have sun gazing. Sun gazing is something that you really have to learn about before you start doing it. Don't just go look up at the sun, but around 3:40, 4 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in there when the sun starts coming up, you have about a 30 to 45 minute window where the sun gives off most of its replenishing forces during that time. And it's just a large amount of it. And then also when the sun is about to go down. So if you have the opportunity to take in those energies from those periods, it really does help the auric field keep up the frequency. And this is how you would know it from another level for those who have access to their third eye. When you look at the sun, you can actually hear the ringing sound in your ear increase. And those who are really sensitive with their body, they can hear their frequency. Most people can hear their frequency. All you got to do is put in like a pair of earplugs and then just listen, and you'll hear this thing that sounds like a ringing in the ear. That's your frequency. That thing can get so high that it becomes apparent that, your frequencies are going up and going down. Likewise, just as a sidebar here, if you hear ringing in the ear, it generally is a communication of some nature, meaning there's other etheric forms, but because they don't have voice boxes, their level of communication or transfer of information is done through that sound, which sounds like basically a data transfer. So the last thing, of course, is sexual energies is definitely last but not least, but you really do have to be concerned about why where your current is. Like basically with your current with your body, a lot of people are concerned about why their current or money problem is occurring, and it has a lot to do with where you're actually spreading your seed or your energy. Remember, the entire universe is of an orgasmic nature. It is an organism. So life is fully familiar with how to be abundant with this energy, because we are in a world where we become somewhat crippled, especially in the sexual nature to how we visualize what that is about. We have a tendency to just be gratified by external sex. And just as I said before about the external thing, it becomes somewhat of a situation in any arena if you let it get out of control. And how that works with the sexual nature is, especially for a male, also for a female, the sexual fluid is what is needed to raise up the kundalini through the body, because it's this fluid and also the orgasmic fluid within woman that allows the spine to be completely filled. And if the spine is not filled, then the chakra centers that are attached to the spine just don't awaken. So that fluid has to build up somewhere. So again, with males, if you're leaking the fluid, understand exactly what you're doing. Montauk Chai is multi-orgasmic man. Woman, her orgasm itself is actually what builds up her energy field. So, of course, woman has to handle that accordingly with, how she deals with herself and what's going on. So I won't get into too much of the birds of the bees, but still see, all of those make a difference in raising your vibration. Hopefully everyone today found something that they can actually latch a hold of and be able to really apply in their life, that they really find some solutions with.
Well, that is such excellent information, judging by the fact that pretty much everybody who started with us an hour and a half ago, and the people who joined in subsequently all appear to still be here. So I really am excited that we got through all 10, and we still have about 25 minutes. So I'm going to just maybe make a couple comments, and then if people want to call in, the number is 646-478-0064, 646-478-0064. I'm wondering, Sevan, and as you're speaking, it sounds like we could do 10 separate shows going deeply into each of the things that you delineated. And again, the invitation is there. Anybody out there listening who feels, they've done a lot of research in one of these aspects and wants to do a show or just wants to be interviewed, please contact me, grumpycheerleader@gmail.com. But I wanted to just ask you to touch upon it a little more, because it's something that I'm so fascinated with and focus a lot on, the whole idea about the fertile field, and maybe say a little bit about, without getting too advanced in our 20 minutes, how the elite, the so-called controllers, are manipulating the field, or have been historically, so that it is less fertile, and why are things different now, and this whole idea of like what's happening with the energy shifts. Why is it becoming more fertile now?
Well, very good question. Because, it's something that really needs to be talked about. Of course, we have to take another segment of time to really get in depth with it, but it boils in many senses into the female, which is definitely, as everything, of course, humanity is very precious, but our women are our extreme level of our survival and exactly our overall survival, how many children we produce and how smart those children are and, what they're going to be able to do in the future. And so because its role has overall been, rejected, meaning that woman is not allowed to take, at this point, her place in the reality as a nourisher. What we've been having is these infertile fields everywhere with, what's just called masculine energy, which is more like a heat. And people need to understand, like, masculine energy is more like a fire, and that's why men were more connected to the fire god. But that's not how you really start to raise and nurture something. There has to be some water, and there has to be the minerals, etc. So that's really the entire linchpin to the fertile to infertile fields, is that if you do have, if a man, if you do have a woman or a wife, that you make sure that she feels abundant. Because what happens is that, and I'll give you the biggest key. Many women, if you ask them now to have a child, they're afraid to have a child. And this really ensues with basically making sure that they don't end up having to take care of the child on their own. And because that's going on so much and so many relationships are not sticking together, then this means a woman mentally begins to reject her seed. Now, because everyone has their role in the universe and everything produces its fruit, what is the human's fruit? And of course, the human's fruit is our children. So, if what happens in the overall consciousness of the female species on the planet, if they begin to think, I don't want to produce any more life, I'd rather have iPhone 5 or, trip to this concert, then that actually begins to affect the entire field. So I'm giving you, of course, I'm going all the way to the core of it before I start kind of going out a little bit more into how it works with, your reality inside of a metal building versus out in a tropical jungle, etc. But just for you to see the root of it and where this really needs to be worked on the most is when woman begins to be happy and confident about bringing children into this world, then all of the fields will enliven. Because it's interesting, when your third eye opens, you actually see an excessive level of decay in the reality that you can't see with your normal two eyes, meaning that when you look at a tree right now with your normal two eyes, that tree looks, especially if it's a vibrant tree, looks decent enough, looks nice maybe. But when your third eye is open, it's very interesting, especially even in Costa Rica, that when you look at trees, you see holes in them, and you see actually that they're dry and that they're really thirsty, even though they don't look like that when the regular eye. So I have to figure out what this exactly is about. But what it really gets into is that the fields that are controlled by our mind, and this is why I think now they're moving over to this cloud drive all the time, and everything is the cloud. And this came from a long time ago, I guess about a year and a half ago. I was talking about how our ideas they make clouds. And, all the consciousness of a particular city is in the clouds, because especially most people keep their ideas according to the hyperdimensional map, in the clouds. So now you have these cloud drives, which are basically a lot of computer data and useless information in the clouds now. So you could just see it's just a counterfeiter that we're dealing with on the dimension, by the way. Everything that we have and how we are etherically, they then do it on an external material level. And then they bring it to us because it's on the outside, and then they convince us that this is what we need. And of course, the root to that is religion, because the churches or the temples and the mosques are configured exactly the same way the geometry is configured within a human body. Any Gothic cathedral or ancient temple is always configured this way, also known as a Temple of Solomon. So what happens with this, though, is that, remember, before there was these electronics and before all of this, there was our concept and idea of what the Creator was. And so that's really what's been tampered with first. And then now all this stuff is just what we're continuously going for as we're falling, as we've already been basically had or been foolish for a moment. But it's a good thing, again, that we're waking up, because once you start to wake up, the first thing you ask, of course, is how long I've been asleep. But really what's happening around you is it becomes where everything starts to become a constant awakening, because you see things and you're like, man, that's been going on for a long time, and how did I miss that? And that starts to not so much as startle you, but it quickens your heart, basically, to make you think, this is strange. Like, I wasn't even awake at all. And so this is of course, I believe, honestly, what the universe really likes us to do. It challenges us at times with us either waking up or some thing that we don't even want to start even thinking about after a while, meaning that what happens if we don't make it? I don't even want to open that door anymore. Like, I already understand how much is really at risk here. And that's what also people need to see, is that that's a big level of frequency lowering too, when you're considering things that you couldn't change anyway. And then the only reason why you cannot change them, I will tell you, is because you haven't got the whole story. Because once you get the whole story, then you realize exactly how much strength and how much energy is going to be associated with you being able to really change something here. And then when you aim for that, and I want to really get this clear, when you aim for that, it doesn't all the time mean that you'll be able to accomplish that. But because those ideas in themselves are so high, even if you hit in the middle on the physical reality, you'll be all right, meaning you'll be in a good zone. And this is what I noticed. If some people are asking themselves, well, why would I ever want to believe in this? Why would I ever want to start accepting these concepts that I'm really an expanded human in a micro-universe, et cetera? And it's because those kind of ideas are so high that even if you make half of the energy that they are really associated with, you'll definitely do very fine in this three-dimensional reality.
Yeah, and you know, and just to speak to the maybe fear some people have, or a part of them may hold on to, of, oh, what if we're not going to make it? I mean, it really is our choice. You know, we can, even if just the people who listen tonight do this work and raise their vibration, it's affecting everybody. When you heal yourself, you heal all your ancestors who had that problem. You become basically a vessel to help heal other people with similar problems, and even other ones. Because once you start to do this work, you just learn patterns of clearing and healing and raising your vibration that work no matter what the problem is. I mean, sometimes the mind wants to separate things, like it's so complicated. And yes, intellectually it is, but when you really stand into your power, you see it's not complicated at all. This organic machinery is so incredibly built that if you just start to align yourself, everything becomes so simple. Even inside of the complexity, you just start to see the patterns and the metaphors, and so you become more skillful. Now, of course, then you start to run into, it's like more money, more problems. You get more power, and it attracts new things to you. But you just start to become better at being you. You become better at being a human being. And if just the people on listening to this show did this work, it really is making a difference. And I imagine a lot of people listening in have noticed this year how much things are shifting as these networks of conscious people come together. It's just exponential. So I really feel like we can choose and just decide today that we're going to make it. And not only are we going to make it, when we all get to this other side, quote unquote, we're going to create this really beautiful life on this planet, and it's our birthright to be here. This whole idea, I mean, we pay to live on our own bloody planet. What is that about? So let's work together, and we are just going to be determined that we actually have won. Just the fact that we're having this conversation, we have won. So now we've won. Let's act like we are winners. What are we going to do?
For sure. Like I said to people, just access that power within, because once you really get the entire picture of what exactly is happening here, then it allows you to be prepared to do what you need to do. Because there is this incredible spiritual essence to an individual, each individual on this line, but until they access that, there is the potential for them to be in this dimension for ever. And that's the other thing. It's an endless knot. So until you get it right, then you can be here. And remember, the controllers are fascinated with that concept. Why some people are fearing that. They don't know, I may be here. That sounds bad. The controllers are fascinated with being here forever because they can control this according to what they think. Meaning that there are limitations.
And I heard you speaking on a show, and I can't get back to the page. I don't remember the man's name. I want to say Craig, maybe. There's a recent show where he interviewed you, and you were talking about this. But the controllers, and I've used the term, it's almost like they have spiritual Down syndrome. They're like the Wizard of Oz. They've got this technology. They've figured out how to manipulate us as organic beings and emotional beings, but actually they're so intent on doing this because they're miserable. I mean, happy, free beings would not want to colonize others. They'd be happy, they'd be free, they'd be spinning their own endless energy. So we actually have all this power, and it's like they've tricked us into thinking that they're ahead of us when it's so not the case. It's the first shall be last and the last shall be first for a really good reason.
Right, and that's really what people need to know. That's something that we have to be aware of, that we are massive. And just the whole hindrance to our expansion is really what has to change now. And I believe that 100% we're up for it, because it's also getting a little boring. I think that there's a lot of people who just see things as they are. You don't have to really give them a whole long speech about what exactly is going on. They're like, okay, just tell me what I need to do. It's like, okay, man, you need to activate, or this thing is going to be like this for it has no creativity to it. It's losing its essence because we're sitting back and being entertained by them, like a computer waiting to be engaged before we make the next decision, like waiting for them to bomb Gaza or them to bomb Israel or somebody to do something so we can get up and say, oh, they're doing this. This looks like the end of the world. I mean, but come on, like, are we just going to continue to wait for them to do something? And so
right, we behave like, and I haven't been to a video game arcade in ages, but, you know, it used to be the case you go to these video game arcades and they'd have the sample game on loop before you put your quarters in. And it's like humanity is sitting there watching the sample game, getting excited as if they're really into something when they haven't even put the quarter in yet. So
right.
I mean, it's so profound how few of us have ever actually experienced our real power. And like, once you start to, it can get a little intimidating, just so people know if you're newer to the process, but don't stop, because it's so incredible. And all these problems which this intellectual overlord people want to complicate and make it seem so impossible, they're not impossible to solve if we just are who we are. Who are you as a human being? Who are you? Why are you here? Find that out and don't stop until you do, because we need everyone to just like learn how to put the quarter in and shift your gears. Right now we're just kind of sitting there with like saliva dripping down our cheek, like, so let's shift. And I so appreciate what you do, Sevan, because you're really contributing lots of tools and information to help people learn how to do that. And as a community, let's come together and support each other if we have fears or feel intimidated to keep going into it.
For sure, for sure. That's definitely what we're here for. There's now a large amount of us. There's these 6,000 people in the resistance, but there's even, you know, millions of people on that same frequency are ready to tap into the same frequency of being just expanded, you know, even beyond resistance. Like some people say, well, all the time, why we use resistance, and I've definitely come up with a million clever reasons on why to still keep a resistance going. But in reality, it's expanding into the wholeness and all itself. And to realize that, like, there's still going to be a little bit of time before we actually come into full realization of that, but it's already started in certain places. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning of this conversation, about how we're dealing with a large body of consciousness. And when one part starts to change, it then starts to affect the rest of the parts. And so I believe that all those that are seeing correctly into their higher chakras definitely see more expansion on the way. And so those are the predictions that we have for the future, not, you know, the old end of the world doomsday end of the world prediction like that. You know, that's over with. So
yeah, and that's kind of a good segue to. We still have a little bit of time, but just in case people have to go, because we only have 10 minutes left. But the next show, since we were so efficient and we got through the top 10 tonight, the next show will be about, what are we going to do? We have this power, and really like hold on to that, even if for you right now it's just a belief, because you'll see it when you believe it. You have to believe it first. You have to accept it. And the next show will be about, okay, now that you put your quarter in the video game, what are we going to do? How are we going to play this? It's our world. It's our planet. And we all incarnated at this time for a reason. If you're listening to this show, you're listening for a reason. Nobody would be here after 2 hours if they weren't, you know, down to play this game. So let's like come up with a plan. We're constantly reacting to these overlords. We're just in reaction, like you're saying. We're just waiting around. Oh, they bombed Palestine. Oh, they did this. So what are we going to do? And importantly, when we talk about that, we need to talk about it from the perspective of our timeless self. Because another problem of the colonized mind is that it's in a rush for like getting shit done by the end of this business quarter. Well, I want to be working on plans that are going to be in place for like, you know, 18 generations from now. Let's start building. Let's plant a tree that won't really come to fruition for several generations, but let's do it. Let's gift ourselves and our future selves. And let's be a little more proactive about it, and let's be creative. And as I said, the more we support ourselves and validate each other about what's going on and validate each other's power instead of tearing each other down and splitting hairs and getting into fights about semantics, let's do this and really, you know, get active about it, because it's so exciting. What I'm seeing is not gloom and doom. It's the absolute opposite. It's like what I'm seeing actually is that my dreams are too small. Like, if there's one thing I could say and not say anything again, is just like, make your dreams turbo-sized, because it can all be real, but it's like we've been shamed and judged and put into these boxes, and we've all just become like the trees you mentioned. We are like those trees. We're like withered. So let's give ourselves some beautiful water and like feed these dreams, because I agree, Sevan, it is getting boring. It's tedious.
That's imagination and invention is what we're really talking about, returning 100% to. And because we had that as a child, and I think everyone can still tap into a little bit of when they were a child and just how, imaginative they were about things, and then that fades out over time. But that imagination is actually the energy and the will tied in right there. That's why I was saying in the beginning, we were able to fuel ourselves off of ideas. And when we're younger, we're able to do that a lot better than when we get older. And so it's all about also making that choice, because you see that one way is going to lead. You've been on the world long enough to see which direction this thing is going to really go if you continue to follow in doing certain things. And so, of course, there's more to get into this. And that's why I said with the raising your vibration, if you're dealing with something that you say, okay, well, this is my habit, I can't stop, is because you're trying to stop it with your mind. You just try to go at it from either your body or your soul. And that's how we can unhinge any situation that we're actually dealing with, because what's been happening is the person doesn't have the knowledge of the mind, body, and soul, and that they're facing the situation on more strongly or more weakly in one of those fields, then they don't understand how to sometimes unseat situations. But I noticed that, for instance, Candida, which is a worm that grows in the stomach that's based on eating a lot of sugar, it suggests to you that you should go eat sugar. So it's not even your idea that you want to go and like bust open a pack of Skittles. It's actually Candida's idea. And so then once the stomach is flushed from the Candida, then the idea is actually removed from you wanting to get these Skittles. It's just like you don't even like Skittles anymore. See, people need to see that you can do it like that. This is not all about you doing it one way, and if you don't do it that way, then you're going to hell, and all the rest of the dogma that has been put in front of you. What happens is that you have to do it at some point, though. So you have to, if you know that it's pulling energy from you, so you can unseat it using one of these other methods. And that's why I say look at the MBS system, see how you can unroot certain situations that are holding you back, and then triangulate yourself, as I call it, meaning by your status of your mind, body, and soul, you can kind of gauge where you're really at in the whole quest, and then get on the quest. You got brothers and sisters, elders all around you, different individuals that are on the quest also and are willing to give you, which is really where our original essence was. They would give you what they had already discovered. They had stored, if anything, only the essence of what they had gained, and then when you met them, they could distribute that to you. That's actually the real 2012. We were talking about that the other night, but I don't think we have any time to be discussing that right now. But again, being able to understand that those who may not get it, it's going to be because of you too, because you can store it and then get it to them. Like we always have to see ourselves like, for better like we're the Red Cross on the astral plane. Like instead of leaving it up to just you figuring it out for yourself, why don't you just start setting up a whole operation where you're figuring it out for other people and helping other people that have been crash landed or stuck in the corner in darkness somewhere for a very long time. Like that's also what Michelle's saying, what are we going to do? We need to do something. That's what we're talking about here. We're not necessarily talking about you running downtown and occupying something. We're talking about you occupying your own mind again. And we're talking about you getting the things that are necessary to actually get you into vividly. Notice I always say that because this thing, they call it spiritual, but it's vivid. If you understand what you're looking for and what you're trying to accomplish and how to accomplish it, it becomes very vivid, the results. So you just have to understand the system in itself, which is in your body, nowhere else, but understanding your body for what it really is a major key. Because the body, of course, is the key. It's the gate itself.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that's why, and I hope I don't sound neurotic, but why I keep harping on this whole need to, just be careful about the tendency to the abstraction, because, the body is the feminine, and the feminine has taken a beating and has been really ignored. And, the field, basically the overlords have, instead of neutral being the zero neutral point, they've actually, on the scale with, let's say, masculine on the far left and feminine on the far right, they've shifted everything so far to the left masculine, and then they call that point neutral. So females have been conditioned to believe that their real self is supposed to be essentially male, but they've been told that that is actually not male, but just neutral. That's just normal person. And so we need to bring neutral back to the real neutral so that, like, the feminine has space to really open, because the feminine has been really reduced to sort of this, like, toxic mimic of itself.
Well, yeah.
And like what you're saying about women not wanting to have kids, like, I don't have kids and I have no interest in it because just I'm not really, first of all, I kind of feel like I'm coming out of a war. And second, you know, I don't feel yet like the world that I'm in is a place I want to have a child. But it's because of this experience. It's not been a very good place for the feminine. It's been beat up and raped and misunderstood. And I feel like we need to maybe just do a whole show on that, because for the feminine inside of all of us, it's going to need a little support, and it's going to need to maybe happen slowly, because you have to show that part of you that it can trust you. It might not even trust you to come out, you know, to let you know that it's there.
Right. Especially since, you know, that the entire chakra center is the age of that chakra center is between, I believe, 5 and 12. So each chakra center that we have in our body corresponds to a specific group of a specific age range that we've went through, and the things that we have that happen during those times actually become what blocks the energy in that chakra. So, you know, it's very interesting, because all this work that's been done on our real body and how to move these problems, they didn't function so much on the problems. Like, if you notice in Eastern teachings, they don't really function on, like, the devil and hell, and ancient Eastern teachings, by the way. They didn't function on the devil and the hell and all these different things. They function on life, joy, being glad that you were here, the gift of nature, etc. While in the Western culture, it's like, you know, the hell and the devil and the demons and evocation. And so notice the difference between the Eastern and Western state, and think about where you may be caught up in it. Because there's also still, like, any polarities are going to be an issue, because if you go into the Eastern teaching, that's also virtually nihilism in nirvana, meaning that, you know, there's no need to be doing anything at this point, not even breathing. So the reality is that there's this balance, because we're these energies that can actually come into these fields and really create the balance and keep the balance going, and that actually gives us something to do in our immortal journey. Because people need to start asking themselves, you know, what would you be doing anyway? So many people are really ready to leave, but, you know, where are you going? And I think the place to actually create, though, is the place that has no pain. Like, I can definitely identify, even with, there's a lot of pain that's associated with life. A woman definitely experiences a lot of that pain naturally, even to bring life. So just with that in itself, because me seeing vividly the effects of things, I believe that the fields we're looking for are painless fields. But if we want to enter that, then the mistakes have to stop. And that's really the biggest thing, is to start to denote, okay, what is the real mistake? Because some people will say that, you know, we're doing everything fine and this is how we're supposed to be. And I think also sometimes that's just as bad as the whole we don't need to be doing anything. Like, the fact is that you put your hand in fire, you're going to get burned. So if you think that that's just how you're supposed to do, go ahead and stick your hand in the fire again, and you'll find the person won't do it. And it's because the lesson has taught them not to do that. So what other lessons?
I just got to interrupt you for 1 second, Sevan, just to sign out, because if be going off air in 10 seconds. Monkeys are really people. Contact me, grumpycheerleader@gmail.com, with any feedback. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, Sevan, it'll keep recording us, so you can finish your thoughts.
Oh, actually, that was pretty much it. You know, we went through about 2 hours of it, and I think that we really got some powerful information out just for people to start applying things to themselves. And but yeah, I think that it was a really well-rounded conversation. I don't think I went a little bit too far as just keeping the message, you know, specific to getting that activation going on within people.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, you know, it was Sevan's idea to do the top 10 ways, and I think that was a great way to ground it, because we're talking about expansion, so the conversation gets expansive, and I felt like this was really a great balance. And, you know, let's contract, you and I will email and figure out when to have you back on. And, but yeah, just already it looks like most of the people who started with us are still here even now. So it looks like we struck a good balance. And I just want to say thank you again for 2 hours of your time and your service. It's been so helpful to me. And, I'm a fiction writer, so I'm kind of running around in these different worlds all the time, and to have someone like you that like delineates them so well, and your ability to organize the information is incredible. So it's really helpful to me, and I imagine other people. But thank you again.
Well, you're definitely, everyone's more than welcome. We got to actually another level of this because I was always saying how we were going to hype this thing up and take it to another level, especially with how we're getting the information. And so this next level is going to be extremely interactive. And I just have to, it'll probably start next week, maybe around the middle of next week once I get pretty much versed in the rest of the equipment that's here. But yeah, like now we have to show people the images also related to what we're talking about. Why not? Like I think we need to use everything we got. Like, sometimes we watch these MMA fighters and these different people, and then they comment on them. They say, oh, this guy's got this and this in his arsenal. He's got the kick, and he's got the elbow, he's got the reach. And people need to start thinking of themselves also on the astral plane and for this awakening as, what do you have in your arsenal? Like, I think right now it's really more important for people to see the images and the pictures and the conversation related to what's being discussed, since they're so used to learning like that, because it becomes so difficult to absorb information on this kind of level, just through the verbal, and then also trying to make that connection, and then your own doubts and going through your mind, and then someone distracting you in the environment. So if you can have this, this interactive show, which is really more like what they would do in a live show where they can show you different things and take you into different places. So this will be what's coming up next for the 2012 show, and also our collaborations with other platforms, because that's really what we were doing, is we were setting it up so that way we can start to have a panel on as someone, myself, is sourcing the pictures and books and information behind what we're talking about in real time, not with just linking it as we were doing before. And then that way everyone kind of walks away also with a video that has all the information that they need inside the video. So that's going to be a major change, of course. We've been waiting out for this, and now we're actually at that point. So good.
I love everything we've talked about, and I'm just trying to think if there's any last-minute stuff. Yeah, everybody, please contact me with suggestions. Oh, your show is on live stream. That's what I need to tell people. The 2012 show.
They go to the website or the live stream show there.